He thought he was ending my career that morning. Everything in that room looked normal, calm, quiet, routine. But there was one thing he didn't see coming, something that had been right in front of him the entire time. And by the time he realized it, it was already too late. Welcome back to Stilled by Laju. If you're new here, stay. This one is different. This is a story about a normal morning which did not stay normal for long. A conversation that looks simple on the surface, but it wasn't. No shouting, no drama, no warning signs, just one decision that changed everything. And the strangest part was that there was only one person in that room that knew exactly what was about to happen. My name is Mabel, and if you looked at my business card back in 2016, it would have said Executive Assistant to Daniel Darwin, CEO of Darwin Consulting Group. That's it, Executive Assistant. But if you looked at the actual work, the proposals, the client strategy documents, the financial models, the pitch decks, you would have seen my handwriting all over them, literally and figuratively. I met Mr. Darwin at a small networking event in Atlanta. He had the personality of a man who could fill a room, but the organizational skills of someone who couldn't find their own shoes in the morning. He was charming, he was connected, and he had a vision, but he had no system, no follow-through, no structure. I had all three. I was 32 at the time. I had spent 8 years working in operations at a mid-sized logistics firm. I knew how to build processes, track budgets, keep people accountable. He saw that within the first 10 minutes of talking to me. He offered me a job 2 weeks later. The pay was decent, not great, but he promised me that as the company grew, my role would grow with it. Equity was mentioned. Partnership was mentioned. He was very good at mentioning things, so I said yes. Those first 6 months, we were basically walking out of his spare bedroom, just the two of us. He would go out and schmooze, attend events, play golf with the right people, get in front of potential clients, and I would stay back and do everything else. I built the company's first operating manual. I set up the CRM system. I created the proposal templates. I drafted the service packages. I trained the first 2 employees we hired. I wrote the employee handbook. I managed the books until we could afford an accountant. And every single time Mr. Darwin walked into a meeting, he was walking in with materials I had prepared. Every time he made a presentation that landed a client, it was a deck I had built. Did he acknowledge this? Sometimes, behind closed doors, he would say things like, "Mabel, I couldn't do this without you." He would laugh and say, "You're the real brains of this operation." I believed him. I worked harder. By year 2, Darwin Consulting Group had 12 employees, a proper office in Midtown Atlanta, and was pulling in just over $2 million in annual revenue. We had clients in real estate, healthcare, and financial services. We had a reputation, and I was still called the executive assistant. I asked Mr. Darwin about a title change that year. He said we'd revisit it after Q4. We didn't revisit it. I asked about the equity conversation we'd had when I joined. He said the company needed to stabilize first. It didn't stabilize. It grew, and we still didn't revisit it. I kept working. I told myself it would come. I told myself he was a man of his word. I was wrong about that. By 2019, Darwin Consulting Group had grown into something real. 31 employees, a satellite office in Charlotte, a client list that included 2 regional hospital systems and a mid-sized private equity firm. Annual revenue was sitting just above $6 million. Mr. Darwin was being featured in Black business magazines. He was getting invited to speak at conferences. He had become a name, and I had become invisible. Not to the staff. They knew who really kept things running. They came to me with every problem. They asked me which decisions needed to go to Mr. Darwin and which ones they should just handle with me directly. They called me the engine room. One of the project managers, a young woman named Tanya, once told me flat out, "Mabel, this whole company is basically you." I laughed it off. I shouldn't have, because while I was laughing it off, I was also carrying the weight of the entire operation on my back. I was managing client relationships. I was resolving billing disputes. I was the person they called when a deliverable was late or a contract needed to be renegotiated. I had also, by this point, done something that would later become very important. I had documented everything. Not out of suspicion, at least not at first. It was just how I was wired. I kept detailed records of every process I created, every system I built, every client communication template, every financial model, every service framework. I kept original versions saved in a personal cloud folder, not company property, my personal folder. I told myself it was just for my own reference, in case I ever needed to show my work, in case I ever needed to prove what I had contributed. I don't know why I felt like I might need to prove it someday, but something in the back of my mind whispered, keep receipts. So I did. Around this time, Mr. Darwin started spending a lot more time away from the office. Not at client meetings, I would have known about those. He was attending events, parties, industry mixers. He was becoming a social figure. And he started bringing a new energy back to the office, a flashier energy. He redecorated his corner office. He bought a Tesla. He started talking about the brand a lot. His personal brand, not the company brand, his. And then one day, he introduced us to Alice. Alice was 26. She had an MBA from Emory, a confident smile, and exactly 3 years of real work experience. Mr. Darwin brought her in as a strategic growth consultant. Her salary, which I found out about accidentally through a misfiled HR document, was $42,000 more than mine. I sat with that number for a long time. $42,000 more. For someone who had never built a thing in her life, who spent her first 2 weeks at the company asking me how everything worked. I trained her because that's what I did. I trained everyone. And the whole time I was training her, I was watching Mr. Darwin watch her, and I started to understand exactly what was happening. Alice wasn't just a new hire. She was a replacement. He just hadn't told me yet. I want to be honest with you. The signs were there before Alice ever walked through that door. I was just too invested to see them clearly. There was the time in 2018 when Mr. Darwin gave a keynote at a business conference in Nashville. He talked for 45 minutes about how he had built Darwin Consulting Group from the ground up, how his vision and strategy had shaped everything, how he had designed the service model, created the client frameworks, and led the operational development. I was sitting in the third row when he said all of that. He didn't mention me once, not my name, not my title, not even a vague team reference, just him, his vision, his strategy, his design. I remember driving back to Atlanta in silence. I remember telling myself it was just a keynote, that he was selling himself, not telling the full story, that it wasn't personal, but it was personal. It was my work he was selling. Then there was the contract situation with Harman Medical Group, one of our biggest healthcare clients. There had been a dispute over deliverables, and the client was threatening to pull out. Mr. Darwin had been unavailable for 3 days, caught up in something personal he never fully explained. I handled it myself. I got on a call with their CFO. I restructured the deliverable timeline. I negotiated a goodwill credit. I saved a $400,000 account. When Mr. Darwin came back, I briefed him. He nodded, said, "Good job," and then sent the CFO a personal email thanking him for his patience, as if he had resolved everything himself. The CFO replied, saying he appreciated how Mr. Darwin had personally stepped in to fix things. Mr. Darwin forwarded me that email with a smiley face emoji. I should have said something then. I didn't. By the time Alice was 3 months into her role, the dynamic had shifted in ways that were hard to ignore. She was being included in strategy meetings I used to run alone with Mr. Darwin. She was being copied on client emails that had always gone through me. She was presenting to the investors, using decks built on frameworks I had created, with her name on the title slide. I went to Mr. Darwin directly. I sat down in his office, and I asked him calmly where my role was headed. What the plan was for my title, my compensation, the equity conversation we'd had about 6 times by then. He gave me the same answer he always gave me. Patient tone, reassuring language, nothing concrete. "Mabel, you know how much I value you. Let's just get through Q4. I had heard that sentence so many times, it had lost all meaning. So I went home that night and I opened my personal cloud folder. I started going through everything I had saved over the years, hundreds of documents, original versions of our proposal templates, our service pricing model, our client onboarding framework, our internal training guides, our project management system, our client communication playbooks, and I started making a plan, not a revenge plan, not yet, a protection plan. I called my cousin, who worked in intellectual property law. We talked for 3 hours. The firing happened on a Tuesday in March of 2021. I had been at Darwin Consulting Group for 5 years. I had helped grow the company from 2 people in a spare bedroom to a 38-person firm with nearly $8 million in annual revenue. And on that Tuesday morning, Mr. Darwin called me into his office and handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a termination letter, a severance offer, 2 weeks for every year of service, and a document called a separation and non-disclosure agreement. That last one was the interesting part. The agreement asked me to confirm in writing that all work I had performed during my employment was the sole intellectual property of Darwin Consulting Group, that I had no claim to any processes, frameworks, or systems I had developed, and that I agreed not to solicit any of the company's clients for a period of 2 years. Mr. Darwin explained it matter-of-factly. He said the company was evolving. He said Alice was taking on a more expanded operational role. He said he hoped we could keep things professional. I looked at that agreement for a long time. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and said, I'll need to have my attorney review this before I sign anything. His face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. That's completely your right, he said. I smiled. Great, I'll be in touch. And I walked out. What Mr. Darwin didn't know was that I had already spoken to my attorney, not my cousin this time, but an actual employment and IP attorney I had retained 3 months earlier. When I first sensed things were heading in this direction, I had spent those 3 months doing something very deliberate. Every proprietary document I had created, every original template, framework, and process guide, I had been quietly establishing provenance for. I had email trails showing when those documents were first created and by whom. I had version histories showing my personal account had created the originals. I had printed copies with creation metadata intact. I had correspondence showing Mr. Darwin asking me to build specific systems, which meant he knew they came from me. My attorney had already reviewed everything. Her conclusion was unambiguous. A significant portion of what Mr. Darwin was calling Darwin Consulting Group's intellectual property had been created by me, outside of any formal employment agreement that clearly assigned that ownership to the company. The original offer letter I had signed in 2016 was vague at best. It hadn't included any IP assignment clause. That was a mistake on his part, a significant one. My attorney sent Mr. Darwin's attorney a letter within 72 hours of my termination. It was 4 pages long. It identified 14 proprietary frameworks, systems, and documents I had created, documented with creation metadata, version history, and email chains showing Mr. Darwin requesting their development from me personally. It noted that I had not signed the separation agreement. It requested that Darwin Consulting Group cease using those materials pending a negotiation regarding proper attribution and compensation. And then it made a proposal. I wasn't looking to destroy the company. I was looking to be paid what I was owed. The letter proposed a licensing arrangement. Darwin Consulting Group could continue using my frameworks under a formal licensing agreement with monthly fees, plus a retroactive payment recognizing my unpaid contributions over 5 years. The alternative, the letter made clear, was litigation, during which every client of the firm, every investor, and every business publication that had written about Mr. Darwin would learn that the systems he had been publicly taking credit for had been built by someone else entirely. Mr. Darwin called me personally 48 hours after his attorney received that letter. His voice was very different on that call. Before the negotiation even concluded, something happened that I hadn't fully anticipated. Word got out, not because I told anyone. I had been careful. My attorney had been careful. But Atlanta's black business community is smaller than people think. And when a 5-year fixture of a company disappears without explanation, people ask questions. 3 of Darwin Consulting Group's long-standing clients reached out to me within the first 2 weeks of my termination. Not to gossip, not to take sides. They reached out because they were concerned. The first was Raymond Holloway, the CFO of Harmon Medical Group. The same man I had negotiated with in 2018 when I saved that $400,000 contract. He had always known it was me who ran point on their account, even when the correspondence went out under Mr. Darwin's name. He called my personal cell and said, simply, "Mabel, where did you go? And what do we need to know?" I told him I was in a transition. I told him I couldn't say much. He read between the lines faster than I expected. "You built that operation, didn't you?" he said. "It wasn't a question. I contributed significantly," I told him. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want you to know that if this goes anywhere, if there's ever a moment where someone needs to speak to what you actually did at that company, you have my number." I thanked him. I told my attorney immediately. The second client was Patricia Webb, the managing partner of a boutique real estate investment firm that had been with Darwin Consulting Group since year 2. She had worked directly with me on 3 separate strategic planning engagements. She called to say she had heard I was no longer at the firm and that she was considering whether to continue their contract without me there. That call was more delicate. I didn't encourage her either way, but she asked me to keep her posted on where I landed. The third call was the one that changed the temperature of the entire negotiation. It came from Gerald Fisher, a senior partner at the private equity firm that had been one of Darwin Consulting Group's highest value clients for the past 2 years. He had attended several of the strategy presentations I had run, presentations that went out under Mr. Darwin's name, but where anyone paying attention would have noticed that every detailed answer to every hard question came from me, not the men standing at the front of the room. Gerald Fisher didn't call to offer support. He called to ask a pointed question. He said he had heard there may be a dispute over intellectual property at Darwin Consulting Group. He said his firm had a standard clause in their vendor agreement requiring disclosure of any material legal dispute that could affect service continuity. He said he wanted to understand whether the situation warranted a disclosure conversation. I told him that was a matter between his firm and Darwin Consulting Group's legal team. He thanked me and hung up. 24 hours later, Mr. Darwin's attorney called my attorney and asked to accelerate the negotiation timeline. Raymond Holloway, Patricia Webb, and Gerald Fisher never had to appear in a courtroom. They never had to sign anything, but their calls, especially that last one, made the cost of prolonged conflict very clear to Mr. Darwin. The clients had spoken, quietly, professionally, and with devastating effect. Despite the pressure from the clients, Mr. Darwin's legal team did not go quietly. They pushed back hard for 3 weeks. His lead attorney, a sharp, aggressive litigator named Alan Crane, filed a motion in Fulton County Superior Court seeking an emergency injunction. The argument was that I had improperly removed proprietary company documents before my termination and that I should be barred from using or disclosing them in any forum. This was the moment I had both feared and prepared for. My attorney, Dr. Vivian Cole, and yes, she had a doctorate in addition to her law degree, which she used to absolute effect in every room she walked into, filed our response within 48 hours. She argued that the documents in question had been created by me using personal tools on personal time, in the absence of any clear IP assignment agreement. She submitted a timeline showing that many of the foundational documents predated any formal company infrastructure, meaning they were created before the company even had servers, company email accounts, or any internal systems that could be said to own anything. She also submitted something that Alan Crane clearly had not anticipated, a sworn affidavit from Tanya, my former project manager, attesting to the operational realities of the company. Tanya described under oath how Mabel had single-handedly built the firm's operating systems, how employees were trained using her materials, how client-facing frameworks had been developed by her, and repurposed under the company's name without attribution. Tanya had left Darwin Consulting Group 3 weeks after I did. She had nothing to lose and everything to say. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. I wore a navy blazer and flat shoes. I was calm in the way that comes, not from confidence, but from absolute preparation. Dr. Cole had walked me through every possible scenario. I knew what was coming. I had done this in my head 100 times. What I didn't expect was what happened at 8:47 that morning. 13 minutes before the hearing was set to begin, Alan Crane approached Dr. Cole in the hallway outside the courtroom. He said his client wanted to explore a settlement. He asked for a 48-hour adjournment. The judge granted it. I stood in that courthouse hallway, and I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I just breathed, because I knew what an adjournment request 13 minutes before a hearing meant. It meant they had seen the affidavit. It meant they knew Tanya would testify. It meant they had run the numbers and decided that winning in court was no longer certain enough to justify the public exposure of a trial. Mr. Darwin never walked into that courtroom, and neither did I. The settlement negotiation happened over the following 6 weeks. Mr. Darwin's team tried every angle. They argued that the IP assignment was implied by my employment. They argued that my documented contributions were just standard job duties. They tried to discredit the version histories by claiming the files had been modified outside company systems, a claim that fell apart the moment Dr. Cole submitted the original file metadata with cryptographic timestamps. They tried to make it personal. Alan Crane, at one point in a joint call, suggested that my claims were motivated by personal grievance rather than legitimate legal standing. He used the word disgruntled 3 times in 4 minutes. Dr. Cole stopped him on the third one. She said very evenly, "My client has submitted 14 documented items of original intellectual property, time-stamped version histories, sworn testimony from a former employee, and 3 client attestations to the nature of her contributions. The word you are looking for is not disgruntled. The word you are looking for is prepared." There was a long silence after that. The final agreement had 4 components. First, a retroactive payment to me of $220,000, structured as a settlement for unpaid contributions and uncompensated intellectual property use over 5 years. Second, a licensing fee arrangement. Darwin Consulting Group would pay a monthly licensing fee to retain the use of 12 of the 14 frameworks and systems I had created. This would run for 3 years, after which they could either renegotiate or discontinue use. Third, written attribution in internal documentation and, where relevant, in materials shared with clients and investors, acknowledging that certain core operating systems used by the firm had been developed by an external consultant. Not my full name in lights, but acknowledgement on paper, signed. Fourth, the non-solicitation clause from the original termination agreement was reduced from 2 years to 6 months, and it applied only to clients I had not already been independently approached by. Mr. Darwin signed it on a Thursday afternoon. His attorney confirmed the execution to Dr. Cole. I got the wire transfer notification on a Friday morning. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and stared at the number on my phone screen for a long time. $220,000. It wasn't everything I deserved. I want to be clear about that. 5 years of my life poured into something I helped build from almost nothing. No number captures that fully, but it was real. It was concrete, and it came with something more valuable than money. It came with a record, a written signed record that said the work I had done was real, that it had value, and that someone had been held accountable for taking it without proper credit. That mattered more than I expected it to. Within 8 months of leaving Darwin Consulting Group, I had launched my own firm. I called it Mabel and Associates. No clever name, no brand strategy buzzwords, just my name on the door, because my name was going on everything from here on out. I started with 3 clients, Raymond Holloway brought Harmon Medical Group over within 90 days of my launch. He had given notice to Darwin Consulting Group shortly after the settlement became known in certain circles. Patricia Webb followed 2 months later. The third client was a referral from a contact I had made at a conference in 2019. Someone who had watched me run a workshop and hadn't forgotten my name. My name, not my boss's name, mine. I built my operating systems from scratch, different from the ones I had licensed to Mr. Darwin, newer, sharper, built on 5 more years of hard-won experience. I was not starting over. I was starting higher. I hired carefully. My first employee was Tanya, the same project manager who had called me the engine room, and who had later put her name on a sworn affidavit when it mattered. She left Darwin 4 months after I did and called me directly. She said she wasn't staying in a company that didn't know how to value the people who built it. She became my first hire, and eventually my operations director. I made sure her title reflected her actual role. From day one, Gerald Fisher's firm eventually became a client of Mabel and Associates in our second year of operation. He never mentioned the call he had made to Mr. Darwin's team during the dispute. He didn't need to. We both understood how things had unfolded. By the end of year 2, Mabel and Associates had 11 clients and was projecting $2 million in annual revenue for the following year. Small compared to where Darwin Consulting Group had been when I left, but it was entirely mine. Every system, every strategy, every process. Built by me, owned by me, attributed to me. I won't pretend the road was easy. Starting over at 40 is not a small thing. There were months where the cash flow was terrifying. There were pitches I lost. There were moments at 2 in the morning where I second-guessed every decision that had led me to that point, but I never second-guessed leaving. As for Mr. Darwin, I heard through mutual contacts that Darwin Consulting Group hit a rough patch the year after I left. Several key processes that had run seamlessly for years started breaking down. Client satisfaction scores dropped. They lost Harmon Medical. They lost Patricia Webb's firm. The Charlotte office closed quietly in the fall. Alice lasted another 18 months before she resigned. I heard she went to work for a competitor. I don't know what became of her. I have no ill feeling toward her. She was handed a role built on someone else's foundation and told it was hers. That's not her fault, that's his. I don't know what Mr. Darwin is doing now. I don't track him. I don't need to, because here is what I know and what I want you to hear clearly if you are somewhere in the middle of your own version of this story. Your value does not disappear when someone stops seeing it. It goes with you. It has always gone with you. The people who take from you without acknowledging it, they can take the work, but they cannot take the capability that produced it. They cannot take the judgment, the experience, the relationships, or the instinct that made the work worth taking in the first place. That lives in your hands, not in a filing cabinet, not in a company folder with someone else's name on the front. Mabel and Associates just signed its largest contract to date. My name is on the door, the letterhead, and every single proposal we send out. No more manila envelopes, no more Q4 promises, no more Daniel, just my name and the work I actually did. And that's the end of the story. Mabel didn't fall apart when he handed her the envelope. She walked out of that office, calm, quiet, and 3 steps ahead. Because everything he thought he was taking from her was never his to begin with. If this story hits you, if you've ever been the one doing the work while someone else got the credit, drop your comments below. I would like to hear from you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share it with them. There's someone out there at the moment sitting in the same position. They need to know how this ends. And please don't forget to follow our page. Thank you.